Do you want to know the top 3 mistakes people make in sports job interviews and what to actually do instead? Watch this video and stay tuned. Hey, I'm Adrian, sports industry career coach. For the best sports career and internship advice, make sure to hit the bell to be notified when I post a brand new video. Okay, so mistake number 1. People often overestimate their passion for sports. When asked a question like, tell me a little bit more about yourself, or why should we hire you, or what makes you stand out from the competition? Some people tend to say that they are extremely passionate about whatever sports team or sports league or sports organization they're interviewing with, and that isn't the answer. Passion, that is actually just pretty much a minimum requirement for any sports organization you're applying to. It's almost like if you are interviewing to be a doctor at some hospital and they ask you, why should we hire you? And then the doctor says something along the lines of, well, I like to help people. And that's not enough because, again, it's a minimum requirement. They're expected to want to help people, just as it's expected for you to be passionate about the sports organization that you're going to be applying to. That is mistake number 1, that people really think that is like the one thing that makes them stand out. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you have been a season ticket holder for the Cleveland Cavaliers for your entire life. That doesn't mean you're more qualified than the next person to get that job. So that's a mistake you definitely want to avoid. And instead of doing that, focus on what value you can bring to the table, what your skills are, what previous experience you have that relates to the actual job that you're doing. Again, passion's a minimum requirement, so try to avoid that. You could talk about being passionate about sports, but it's not necessarily the factor that's going to make you stand out from the next person. So definitely keep that in mind. Mistake number 2 that I've seen people make in sports interviews are thinking that the fact that they know every sports player on a team is going to make them stand out from the next person and makes them, again, more qualified than the next person. That is absolutely not the case. This is something that, even when people are applying to sports jobs or thinking about working in sports, just because you're a sports fan doesn't necessarily mean that you are the right person for a specific job. And at the end of the day, if you're only worried about and thinking about, oh, are they winning or losing or whatever, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're the most qualified person for a job. Sports organizations don't want to necessarily hire fans. They want to hire people who can get the job done. So knowing all the players on the 1974 roster, including all the backups and trades and all that, that doesn't matter unless obviously you're trying to be a sports broadcaster or a sports historian at some museum somewhere. That is a different scenario, but in most instances, knowing all the players on the team, or talking about your favorite player in the interview for half of the time, that kind of eliminates you from being a qualified candidate, because the sports organization will see you as someone who doesn't necessarily want to work for the team. They just like the idea of working for the team. So keep that one in mind. Instead of focusing all your energy on talking about your favorite player, focus on, again, how can you bring your qualities and skill set and previous work experience to the table when you're interviewing with them. And again, you can talk about your favorite player, but it wouldn't be the main topic of conversation during the interview. So again, keep that in mind. Okay, moving on to mistake number 3. This mistake actually falls on the opposite spectrum of what mistake number 2 is, which is just knowing too much about the team. And for the opposite spectrum of that, for mistake number 3, is not knowing enough. This situation actually happened to me where I was, going to be interviewing with the Dodgers, and during the interview, one of the questions was, who is your favorite player on the Dodgers? And I'm not a Dodgers fan. I'm a casual Giants fan. I don't watch baseball every day. I went into the interview, and this was, very early on in my career, where I didn't really know, again, who the players were, to a large degree. And even though I did a little research beforehand and just knowing who some of the key players were, I was under pressure during the interview, so I completely forgot all their names. Now, fortunately, this was a group interview, so during the interview, they were going around asking, the different candidates, who's your favorite player, and I was smack dab in the middle. And the answer that I gave, which was Jackie Robinson. I went to UCLA, and I know that he was a Dodger, and no one had used that answer yet. So, and fortunately for me, that answer came to my mind. But at the end of the day, it taught me a pretty valuable lesson, which is just make sure you still do your research regardless. You don't have to go too crazy about, again, who the 1974 starting lineup was for the team. That doesn't matter as much as just knowing, some of the key players and just keeping that in mind when you're going through the interview process. For those of you who've stuck to the end, I actually have a bonus tip for you that is pretty important, and I've heard this a lot from different people who've been interviewing for jobs in the past. So just to give you some background on this bonus tip, when I was a student at UCLA, our school colors are blue and gold, and USC's obviously our hometown rival across town. But one thing that I've heard from some interviewers in the past is to not wear your rival school or team or whatever's colors, because that could have a negative first impression on you when you're interviewing. And just for example, USC's red. You probably don't want to go into the interview at UCLA's athletics department wearing a red shirt or dress or whatever. So keep that one in mind. It doesn't apply to everything, but it doesn't hurt to have some matching colors with the organization that you're applying to, just to have that same vibe and mesh and whatever with them. But keep that one in mind, and that's the bonus tip for you. I've just shared 4 tips with you on mistakes to avoid in sports interviews and what to actually do instead. And now I'd like to hear from you. What's one mistake that you've seen or have actually done in an interview? And please put that in the comments below, just so I know, and maybe we can cover some solutions for that in some future videos. Please hit the subscribe if you like this video, and share with your friends who are maybe searching for sports jobs right now at the moment too, or are currently in the interview process. And I'll see you in the next video.